So, ladies and gentlemen, today I have my Jaimini guru, Mark Boney, back again to tell us again some amazing stuff about Jaimini astrology, which is now one of my favorite astrologies. So, I don't need to introduce him. I don't need to praise about him. You already know how great he is. So, welcome.
Thank you, Kapiel. I always enjoy your build-up.
I know.
I appreciate being on the opportunity to speak to your audience again. And, just to lay the table a little bit, Kapiel Raaj was the first Jyotishi to ever teach Jamini in the United States, right? And that was back in 1994, a long time ago. I was part of that class. And so I learned the Jamini system from him, and he was actually really one of the few astrologers even in India, outside of Andhra Pradesh, that were using the system. And has probably been, responsible to some degree personally for a revival of it, right?
Yeah.
There have been others, and now it's being widely used.
Yes.
But when I studied with him, obviously I then started interested in examining the original source material myself, which was the Jaimini Sutras, and I discovered there were some aspects of Jyotish that he didn't incorporate in his teaching. That then became a focus of research for me, and I found them to be useful and valuable, and so they are a part of what I teach. And you having taken my courses, you're aware of these. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to share screen now and kind of talk about some of these. I will mention that starting this Saturday, I'm going to be teaching my Jaimini Level 2 course. It's open to anyone who has taken my Essentials of Jaimini course or who has studied the basics of the Jaimini system. But right now in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about some of the content of that course. Okay. So please tell me that you can see a document that says Yogatas.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So actually, you won't find this word in the Jaimini Sutras itself, but it's in common parlance in the world of Jaimini. And the word literally means yoga maker. And it's rather equivalent to the concept of yoga karaka in the Parashari system, meaning some planet that takes on a special status that then can bring particularly good fortune. And by good fortune, we're talking about status and what usually goes with it, which is affluence, right? So this is one of the things I'll be teaching in this upcoming course. A very interesting concept, as you know. And let me just sort of share some of the sutras that speak to this. And these can be found in the first chapter of the Jaimini Sutra, third pada, right? And you see, and this is my breakdown of each of the Sanskrit words, my, transliteration of that, or my, literal interpretation or translation of that. Sorry, everyone. I have this puppy who's a little bit very vocal when other dogs go by. Sorry. And then, so what it says here, in Jaimini you have three special lagnas, right? Something called the Hora lagna, Gatika lagna, and Bhava lagna. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to get into how these are derived or anything, but your programs give you these. Yeah. They're all going to fall at certain points within the zodiac, and therefore at certain points within anyone's chart, right? And what this sutra is saying is that when a planet is either conjunct or making an aspect to any of these special ascendants, then it takes on this status of what is referred to in the world of Jaimini as a yogata, and it then can be a combination that can give you status. It says here that it'll make you a king, right? And we have to be clear that when we say aspect, because we're doing Jaimini, we're talking about Rashi Drishti. We're talking about sign aspect, right? So the idea is that if any planet in a chart is conjunct or making aspect to any of these three special ascendants, that's a good thing for that planet in terms of increasing its ability to give good fortune, good karma, right? Now, this would also be true for any planet that simultaneously aspects both the first house and the seventh house. And these combinations could all be applied to three divisions, the Rashi, the regular birth chart, Navamsha, and Rekana. Just to keep things simple, I'm going to just confine myself to this sort of situation in the Rashi. Now, what the next sutra says, if that if the planet doesn't aspect all three and the first and the seventh lord, well, then its ability to be a yogata gets diminished, right? And this is true even so in sort of the Navamsha and Drekana. So really what this comes down to is what I've summarized here. It's good to have a planet conjoined or aspect any of the special ascendants and the first and the seventh house. And the more a planet does that, the better, and the more it becomes a yogata, meaning it's a planet capable of bestowing good fortune on a person. And then, of course, if such a planet has sources of strength, like being in the own sign or exaltation sign, then it can do so in great measure. And these planets can be identified in the birth chart, Navamsha, and Drekana. The best Raja yogas are when a planet conjoins or aspect all these points. Otherwise, the Raja yoga is diminished proportionally. Now, you'll not find a planet, or I haven't found one, that's going to meet all these qualifications in all three divisions. But as I said, I'm going to confine myself to the Rashi here and so show some intriguing illustrations. Now, I would also mention that, you're aware of this concept of Argala in Jaimini, right? You have the idea of planets that form Argala by falling in the 4th, the 2nd, or the 11th from any point in the chart without planets correspondingly in the 2nd or the 10th or the 3rd that would obstruct those.
3rd, 10th, and the 12th. Right.
Right, the obstructing points.
Yeah.
12 obstructs 2nd, 3 obstructs 11, 10 obstructs 4.
Right.
So, there's a lot of misunderstanding about this, but the Jaimini Sutras make very clear itself that one of the primary uses of the concept of Argala is to qualify these yogata planets, right? Now, what does that mean? It means that if you have a yogata planet, and then it also has unobstructed Argala, then the good result of that planet will be more constant, more stable, more reliable, right? So that's what I mean when I say that the Argala is used to qualify these yogata planets. And in the same way we qualify any yoga, right? Is it going to get full fruit? Is it going to partial fruit? Is it going to get no fruit? Is that fruit going to be blemished? Is it going to be pure? All that sort of thing, right? All right. So with these thoughts in mind, I want to start sharing some dramatic examples. Okay.
Okay.
And when you won't find this term in the Jaimini Sutra itself, but planets that, in a birth chart, are connected to all three special ascendants, as well as the Lagna in the 7th house, are referred to as Mahayogatas. Okay? Again, you won't find that term in the Jaimini Sutras, but it's the idea of a planet who connects to all these points. So I'm showing the chart here of Queen Victoria, who reigned over the British Empire at its height for decades, right? So, enormously high status. She was literally not a king, she was literally a queen, right? And you'll find that when the sun is very close to the degree of the ascendant, all these special lagnas will also fall in the ascendant. So you see that here? The ascendant degree is 1028 and the sun's at 1046, so very, very close. And in that case, you'll often see that these special ascendants are all in the lagna. Now, what planets either are conjoined or get the Rashi Drishti to these points?
Moon is the Matrikarka conjunct Sun, and then Jupiter aspects the ascendant, which is the Matyakarka, so causes Raj Yoga.
So the sun's there, the moon's there, and then Jupiter is making a Rashi Drishti onto these points, and also both the 1st and the 7th house.
Yeah.
So actually Jupiter, her AMK is a Maha Yogata here, meaning it covers all those qualifications. Now, the sun and the moon, and think about who the royal planets are. Sun, moon, and the planet of dignity, Jupiter. Jupiter's in its debilitation sign here, but what? You see anything?
It gets cancellation of debilitation.
Very, very effective cancellation as a result of the Parivartana Yoga.
Yeah.
And so, this is an example of what has come to be known in the world of Jyotish as Mahayogatas. Jupiter is a full Mahayogata. The sun and moon, of course, is in its exaltation sign here, are nearly Mahayogatas. And this is not the only reason that she had such status in life, such a destiny in life. Now, I won't do it here, but if you saw these points in her Navamsha and Drekana, you'll see that the Sun, Moon, and Jupiter all continue to be Yogata planets. And this is what the Sutras is saying is safe. So it's not just seeing this in the Rashi, but seeing this in the Navamsha and Drekana as well. And if the Yogata status continues in those division as well, then the whole thing gets much more magnified. So this is one of the more dramatic examples that you'll find. Now, you recognize this gentleman?
Oh, the cricketer, yes.
So most people will, or at least most Indians will. This is someone who is extraordinarily successful as a cricketer, a legendary cricketer. And now here, even though the sun is actually not near the ascendant here, you see that both the Katika Lagna and the Bhava Lagna fall in the Jamna Lagna, fall in the birth Lagna Virgo, and the Hora Lagna. And by the way, I should mention that the GL, or the Gatiki Lagna, is especially seen for status and power, whereas the Hora Lagna is especially seen for wealth. So again, planets getting connected to this point empower them to bring that type of experience more. So now with anybody with a Dishwa Bhava, a dual Rashi on the ascendant, any planets in the dual Rashis are going to aspect each other, right?
Yep.
So all of these planets, that is, not all of them, but, Mercury, Sun, Saturn, Jupiter, and Moon, 5 grahas, are aspecting both the Lagna and the 7th house from their Pisces by Rashi Drishti. And they're all connected to the GL, the HL, and the BL. You see that?
Yeah.
So they're all perfect Mahayogas. And then among those, which of these planets has particular strength?
It's obviously the Jupiter.
Jupiter gets what kind of strength here?
Direction strength.
And then any other planets have sources of strength?
And Mercury.
Mercury's in its own sign. And what do we know about the sun in the 10th house?
What do I know what?
What do you know about the sun when it goes to the 10th house?
Oh, direction strength.
Direction strength. So not only do these planets all connect to the 3 special descendants and the 1st and the 7th house, but you've got a number of them with very good sources of strength.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the other question is okay, and then apply the idea of Argala. Is for the planets.
I was looking at the Argala perspective where Sun and Mercury are negating the Argala, even though Venus is causing Argala in the 11th with Rahu.
Well, I'm not counting Rahu here, but Venus is a natural benefic. It's in the 11th with no planets in the 3rd from Virgo. So if we take Virgo as the point, right?
Yeah.
And the planets in there, they get a Shubha Argala from Venus in the 11th unobstructed.
Yeah.
So the idea here is that these Yogata planets in the 1st house are also getting this Shubha Argala, which is a favorable qualification. Okay. Now think about Charadasha, all right, one of the main methods for timing things, because the question becomes, okay, you have these Yogata planets, when do you get the fruit of that? And the answer, of course, you get the fruit when you're running periods that are connected to these.
Yeah.
So he's going to start life in his Virgo Mahadasha, but if you started, calculating, you'd see that in prime athletic years, he's going to come to his Sagittarius period.
Right. Of course.
Which, of course, is activating all these yoganas, right?
Yeah.
And look what happens to the 10th house from there.
Raj Yoga, yeah.
Major, just a strong influence. There's a number of things going on.
The Sagittarius.
Right, and of course he's getting ridiculously wealthy at the same time. But he also has an extremely high status in this world. By the way, I'll just parenthetically comment. In the Jaimini system that the AMK is something of a career indicator, right?
Right, Amatakaka, yes.
You see it here with the GK. Now, what could that mean? So
career will require competition, dealing with enemies and competition.
That's it. He's constantly fighting opponents, and quite successfully, right? So this is one of the ways in which the GK can have a favorable indication, right?
Right.
And so, again, I'm showing I always, when I'm trying to teach a principle, first I'm showing the very dramatic illustrations, right? These are unusual charts. These are not ordinary charts.
Right.
And they didn't have ordinary destinies, but there's astrological reasons why that's the case, right? And from the Jaimini point of view here, part of that story is told by the exceptional Mahayogatas that so many of his planets become here, right? In strength. Now, again, I'm not showing divisional chart. I'm not showing Navamsha. I'm not showing Drekana. But the more in which these same planets, who are Yogatas in the birth chart, also additionally become Yogatas in those divisions, all the better, right?
Does it happen for him in Navamsha and Drekana?
To some degree, they don't. Not to the extent.
Okay. Why specifically Drekana?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't never pretend to know more than I know. I just don't know. That's the reason is that's what Jaimini gives.
Yeah.
What the logic is behind that, I couldn't say. Navamsha maybe is more, clear that way since it's such an important divisional chart. But why the Drekana, I'm not sure. That's just what the Jaimini sutras give. But I've also tested the validity of that as well. So another, this time an American sports figure, Pete Rose, who American baseball player, holds the record for most career hits, right?
Yeah.
And here, again, you have a situation like in the chart of Queen Victoria where all these special ascendants are in the birth login as well.
Yeah.
Right? And of course, think about, and of course, all these planets in Pisces, or all these grahas in Pisces are in the first house. They're going to aspect the seventh.
Yeah.
So, in other words, in this chart, Venus and Mercury qualify as, let's use that term, Mahayogatas, because they fulfill all the qualifications being connected to all three special ascendants as well as the first and the seventh house, and then strength. Venus, of course, is just a degree, it's Vargotama exalted, just a degree or so away from its highest point of exaltation. And of course, Mercury is getting Nichabanga Raji over here. Okay? Now consider Argula to these points. Consider Argula.
Oh, yeah, the Saturn, Sun, Jupiter, and Mars.
All forming. Now, Yogatas are more superior if the more planets there are, and if they're natural benefics, or if they're exalted malefics.
Yeah.
So this wouldn't be any old Argula. These are what's called superior Argulas.
Superior Argulas.
Right? And Mars here has two sources of strength. Of course, it's in its exaltation sign, but do you see another source of strength? What's happening with its sign lord, Saturn?
Oh, the dispositor. Oh, Parivartan Yoga. I was looking at it from the Jaimini perspective.
Well, but that's fine too.
Yeah, because I'm like, okay, so what's happening with here? But yeah, in Parashri, it's Parivartan Yoga that is occurring.
And you've got a Vargotama exalted sun as a part of this Shubha Argala, right?
Yeah.
Then you've got Jupiter who goes into its own sign in Navamsha.
Yeah.
Mars gets very effective cancellation of its stability. Saturn does, and then Mars is exalted. So in other words, all the planets forming Argala also have sources of strength.
Source of strength, wow.
And this is what Jaimini was saying about Yogata planets that then get the additional benefit of not just any Argala, but also Shubha Argala. These are the ones that will give the most pronounced and dramatic results. Now think about his Charadasha. Would have started in Pisces, right?
Yeah.
He's starting getting his late teens, early 20s when he's in Taurus, when those Argala points, those Yogata points in Pisces are falling in the 11th from there. All those planets in Aries would have been aspecting the 10th from Taurus, including the AMK.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But then he moves into Gemini. And now Pisces becomes the 10th house, and those planets in Aries become the 11th house.
Yeah.
So you see how these configurations are getting activated at a time when, he's at his peak age for, competing in athletics successfully.
Right.
And of course, you know, he was a perennial all-star. He was most valuable player. He was rookie of the year his first year. You know, he set the record for the most career hits. As you know, he later suffered great scandal when he got kicked out of baseball for gambling.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, there was a downfall there at some point. But, you know, you can see here how his chart with these Mahayogatas that are extremely well qualified as far as strength and also the Argala, it's a dramatic illustration of this principle that I quoted from the Jaimini Sutras, that when a planet is connected to all three special lagnas in the first and seventh, it takes on this yoga maker, this yogata status. Clear?
What is BL stand for?
Bhava
Bhava.
The three special lagnas are Bhava Lagna, Katika Lagna, and Hora Lagna. And,
That pretty much Bhava Lagna.
No. Ruda Lagna is different.
Right.
Ruda Lagna is different from Bhava Lagna. And it's not exactly the same as the Jamna Lagna either.
Right.
The birth month. Right. So, you know, in Parashara Hora, in some of the earlier chapters, there's a chapter entitled Special Ascendants.
Right.
Where it gives these lagnas and gives their calculation and how they're derived. We don't need to know that. Our programs give us that.
Also had a question. Do these Argalas, do they have the same empowerment as the Argala?
Okay. All right. So what you're referring to, there's what's called three principal Argalas, and the three principal Argala positions are from any point in a chart, the second, the 11th, right, and the fourth, right? Or maybe the second, fourth, and 11th is a better way to say that. Those are what's called principal Argalas. Then additionally, there's something called a Viparit Argala that only applies when from any point there are three natural malefics, right? So you say you had Mars, Saturn, and the Sun, for example, from any point in a chart, and that can't get obstructed. That's called a Viparit or reverse Argala. And then there's what's called a Trikona Argala, where there's controversy about how that is to be understood. I go by what Irangranti talks about, since he had access to some really ancient commentarial literature on Jaimini, which indicated that the Trikona Argala happens when a natural benefic is either by itself, is either in the fifth or the ninth, and there's no planets in the other trine. So say, for example, in this chart, say Jupiter was in Cancer, right? And there was no planets in Scorpio, the other trine, from Pisces. This would be an example of a Trikona Argala. Is this what your question you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Now,
So moon you would not consider having a Trikona Argala?
Well, if it was bright or, you know, well dignified, yes, you would consider the moon here. Now, in this case, it's kind of, you know, it is bright. It's nearly full, but it's also in its debilitation sign, so it'd kind of be a judgment call whether it would be forming Trikona Argala, right? I'd probably say it's more so than not. In which case, these planets in Pisces, these Yogata planets in Pisces, would have two principal Argalas and one Trikona Argala.
Right.
It'd be theoretically, right? So now, you know, so that's enough about Yogatas. You know, another main content of this course I'm going to be teaching upcoming is the effects of planets from KRSchannel Lagna. As you well know, this is probably the most special Lagna that is used in the Jaimini system. The longest part of the Jaimini Sutras, at least that what we have, is on this effects of planets from KRSchannel Lagna. By far and away the greatest number of sutras. And the combinations there have always intrigued me when I first came across them, and I've always sought to test them. Now, one of those combinations, it says in the Jaimini Sutras that if in the 10th house from the KRSchannel Lagna, and first of all, what's the KRSchannel Lagna? You take the planet with the highest degrees, who's the Atmakaraka, you see its position in Navamsha, right? And you use it back in the birth chart as a Lagna, call it KRSchannel Lagna, right? That's what we mean by the KRSchannel Lagna. And the Sutra says that if Mercury is in the 10th from KRSchannel, in strength, and has the additional influence of a natural benefic, well, then the person's going to be very successful in whatever their line of endeavor is. And also then it says that if the sun is in the 10th house from the KRSchannel Lagna, in strength, and with the additional influence of natural benefics, then the person is going to be the Lord of the earth. Right? So these are, I'm not showing the Jaimini Sutra here, but that's the gist. So I used this principle actually to predict that Emmanuel Macron would become president of France. Back, I think it was in 2017. He was a newcomer, not to government, but to politics, and the political party that he was running on had just really come into being. So it was rather, and of course he's the youngest person ever to become president of France. But after seeing his chart and seeing it from the Jaimini angle and then looking at timing, I was convinced that he would win, and it turned out to be correct. First of all, what's the dramatic Jaimini Raja Yoga in his chart? What can you identify that, Kapiel?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Harakarka receiving the. I'm sorry. It's Atmakarka and Atmakarka.
That's it. Okay,
Yeah.
so you can see here there's a mutual Rashi Drishti. We're using sign aspect here between the AK and 28 to Scorpio. Can you know where that's going to fall in Navamsha? 28 Scorpio, where's it going to fall?
It's going to fall in the Bhagavatam.
Well, it's going to fall in exaltation, not Bhagavatam. It's going to be
exaltation. Okay.
It's going to go to Pisces. So I'm pointing that out because it means that the AK here, Venus, has a great source of strength. And then it's the AK and it's in a mutual glance with the AMK. That's one of, as you know, one of the more dramatic Jaimini Raja Yogas. But see that both of them are connected to the GL, Gati Lagna, which make them partial Yogatas. And remember, the Gati Lagna relates to power and status. Now, they're also the Moon-Venus combination. Regardless of what karakas they are, right? You know that Moon-Venus combination in Jaimini, by conjunction or by mutual Rashi Drishti, form both a dramatic Raja Yoga and Dan Yoga.
Yeah.
So this is part of the indication in this chart from a static potential. But the sutra that I'm quoting here, now I'm going to show you the chart from Karakamcha Lagna, which for him would be Pisces, because his Atmakaraka Venus goes into Pisces in Navamsha, so Pisces becomes the Karakamcha Lagna. We're using it back in the Rashi. Now think about the sutra that I quoted. Mercury or Sun in strength and under the influence of additional natural benefics. So where is Mercury's source of strength here?
Parivartan Yoga.
That's it. And of course, these planets, both Mercury and the Sun, get the Rashi Drishti of Jupiter, who also has a source of strength being involved in that exchange. And of course, the Sun in the 10th house gets directional strength.
Yes.
So I saw when I was, wanting to see if he might win the election, I saw that he was running his Gemini major period.
Oh.
His Gemini major period, which of course activates this structure.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm remembering this sutra. And is he going to become Lord of the Earth? Meaning, is he going to become a head of state? And, I'm going from memory here, but I believe the sub-period when he was contesting election was Scorpio, which of course is activating the AMK, AK, Moon-Venus, Raja Yoga, with the AK having such great strength being exalted in the motion. So this is an illustration. You hear me say it all the time. Yogas show what? Dashas show when. Certain yogas were being activated from the Karakamcha Lagna, showing the static potential of having a very high status. And then the sub-period was also giving that. And he was contesting election. I didn't have the chart of the other people that were contesting the election, but this looked really strong to me. So I went out on a limb and said, yes, I think he's going to win. Now, our current president, Donald Trump, you'll see that he has the exact same thing in the sense that he has Mercury in Gemini and Jupiter in Virgo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you see who his Karakamcha Lagna is, it comes out to be Virgo.
Yeah.
So again, you've got Mercury in strength in the 10th house from the Karakamcha Lagna. aspected additionally by a benefic. Now, this benefic Jupiter doesn't appear to be that strong, but if you understand that this Jupiter was station point at his birth, you'll see that it's actually very strong. Very strong. And it's also interesting to see that Mercury is his MK. Where did he get his initial success?
Real estate.
Yeah. Real estate. Yeah. Remember, it said the sutra says the person will be, if this is the case, if Mercury in strength with the additional influence of the natural benefic falls 10 from Karakamsha, a person will be very successful in their line of endeavor. Now, Mercury being the NK gives us additional clues as to what the line of endeavor would be. And it was in his Gemini major period in Charadasha that he first became a reality TV star and then became president. What happens when you become president? What very special house do you get to move into?
White House. Yeah, Matrika.
You see? It's brilliant, no?
Yes.
Beautiful. So, one more example from the entertainment world, not the political world. You recognize the name Ted Danson?
Ted Danson, yeah, I know the name, I just don't know exactly what he does.
Yeah. Well, you remember the old TV show Cheers?
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, Ted Danson.
He became the highest paid actor on television by playing the role of the bartender on Cheers Sam Malone.
Yeah.
Right? And of course went on to have another successful TV series called Becker, and he's still a TV star, many, many decades. So usually successful. Now, see who his AK is here. His AK is Saturn, right?
Mm-hmm.
28 degrees 56. Can you place it in Navamsha?
It'll be in Libra, I guess.
I shouldn't put you on the spot like that.
Yeah, because I'm not.
Okay, I shouldn't put you on the spot like this, Kapiel. Sorry. It goes to Pisces.
Pisces, okay.
So Pisces becomes his Karakamsha Lagna. Now see his chart from Karakamsha Lagna. What do you notice in the 10th house?
Oh, Mercury and Sun.
Again, Mercury and the Sun, just like in the chart of Emmanuel Macron. Now, is there any additional benefic influence? Because remember, that's part of the formula. Look on both sides.
Onto the Karakamsha Lagna or just...
No, onto those planets in the 10th house, onto Mercury and the Sun.
Mercury and the Sun, any benefic influence?
Look on both sides of it.
Both. Oh, the Argala, the Trikona Argala.
Well, it's actually not Argala. What it is, it's benefic hemming.
Oh, benefic. Oh, that's what you're talking about. Okay.
The Sagittarius and the planets in it, the Sun and Mercury, which are the 10th house from Karakamsha Lagna.
Oh, I see. See, I'm not even, but I've used the hemming thing. I'm thinking more of Parashri, and I'm just trying to stick to Jaimini here.
Well, no, hemming is a part of any sign in Jaimini gets either purely benefic hemming or purely malefic hemming. That's a very strong influence in the Jaimini system, as well. And if I showed you his birth chart again, you'll see that. The point is that you've got this combination that applies that is going to make someone very successful in their line.
Okay.
Now again, when is that going to happen? He's had his first success when he ran Sagittarius, and he had his greatest success when he ran Pisces, from where that combination would fall 10th and duplicate the pattern from Karakamsha Lagna.
Right.
So what I've shown you here is 3 examples of this sutra in the chart of Emmanuel Macron, Donald Trump, and Ted Danson, all who had Mercury in the 10th from there with additional benefic influence, oftentimes in strength.
And isn't Atmakarka and Bhatrikarka combination is for performing arts, the first and third house effect?
That's exactly right. You've heard me say over and over again, when you have the AMK, which gives something of a career indicator, and the BK, it can be a career performing. Now that can be artistic performance like acting, or it can be an athletic performance, right? But you'll see this. In fact, someday I'll produce my research on that. I've collected many, many, many examples of it, right? It can happen by conjunction. It can happen by Rashi Drishti. It can even happen by exchange. If you look in the chart of Mel Gibson, there's an exchange between Jupiter in Leo and his sun in Sagittarius. One is the AMK and one is the BK. So the connection there is happening, which is actually the strongest way it can happen.
Right.
Is happening by exchange. It can happen by conjunction. It can happen by exchange. It can happen by mutual Rashi Drishti, which is what happens here. Right? You'll also see that AMK BK combination includes the AK. So it's the AK AMK combination Raja Yoga, right? Plus the BK.
Yeah.
Now look at his AMK and look at the GL and the HL, status and wealth, up there in Aries. You'll see that Jupiter is connected to those by Rashi Drishti, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes a partial Yogata because of that. Doesn't aspect onto the 7th house and the 1st house, doesn't connect to the BL, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm showing here is that, when a planet gets enhanced and becomes, it's always a matter of what degree is a planet a Yogata. Here it's not that full Mahayogata that I was showing in the first examples, right? But it's still a very favorable thing, particularly when you add to the fact that this AMK is involved in the AK AMK Raja Yoga.
Where does Jupiter fall in Navamsha here?
It falls in the 7th Navamsha, so it would actually go into its debilitation sign, but you'd see that debilitation is canceled in the Navamsha.
Okay.
In fact, so you have to, usually if a planet will have some underlying weakness, if it's debilitated in the birth, here it's in the sign of a great friend, and in terms of its dignity, it would deteriorate if it truly was debilitated in the Navamsha, but you'd find that that's not the case.
Okay.
So just randomly, these combinations given in the Jaimini Sutra have always really intrigued me, and I've always sought to test them. I once heard some Jaimini scholar say that, yogas in the Shastras, yogas in the classics of Jyotish, Parashari, you'll oftentimes find them working, but not always. The ones in the Jaimini Sutras seem to work all the time, in my experience. They're very reliable if you understand them and the way in which they also need to be qualified. One that intrigued me is referred to as a tapasvi yoga. Tapasvi is someone who practices tapas, that is someone who practices spiritual disciplines, someone who does sadhana, right? That's what a tapasvi is. So tapasvi yoga will give a person an inclination towards this, and it's defined by when Venus is conjunct or aspected by simultaneously both Ketu and Saturn. Now, Boga means worldly enjoyment, right?
Yeah.
And Venus is a planet of Boga. It's the planet of worldly enjoyment. And then Ketu and Saturn are planets of detachment. They're planets of Vairagya, dispassion. So when you have the Boga planet Venus simultaneously influenced by the two planets of detachment, dispassion, Ketu and Saturn, this would then potentially give rise to a tapasvi yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm showing here the chart of Pope John Paul II. And you'll see that his Venus up there could hardly be more closely conjunct Ketu, right?
Yeah.
22, both at 22 degrees, and then Saturn over in Leo is going to be in a mutual Rashi Drishti with those planets.
Okay.
So, of course, he was a Catholic priest. They take vows of poverty and chastity and so on and so forth. He was someone who obviously practiced spiritual disciplines, was a tapasvi in that sense. So you see how this yoga is applying to his chart. And of course, he didn't marry. It's related to the 7th house. You'll also see from a Parashari point of view, Dushkriti yoga here. The 7th lord goes to the 12th, while there's additional malefic influence on to the 7th house.
Yeah.
Rahu Ketu in this case. So,
and the 7th lord is hemmed too with malefics.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Very
now,
good.
one thing I want to ask you, this tapasvi yoga, is that a Parashari yoga being used in Jaimini concept, or? No. All these, the yogas that I'm pointing out here are given in the chapter on the effects of planets from KRSchannel. KRSchannel, okay.
These are Jaimini yogas, and that's why they're being formed by Rashi Drishti. So I didn't mean to confuse you there, but we're focused on Jaimini here. So the
Oh, you should
combinations.
do a class on Jaimini yogas. I don't think you've done that with us.
Well,
That
I
would be
have. Well, I have in the sense that you took Jaimini level 2, where I translate, comment on, and illustrate many of those combinations given in the effects of planets from Karakamsha Lagna. And those yogas that we were just talking about, those yogatas, are Jaimini Raja yogas.
Yeah. No. This is the first time I'm hearing the Tapasvi yoga. That's what.
Right, because I didn't, there's like 129, maybe more. Sutras in that chapter. In that course you took, I didn't address all of them. I'm just giving you and giving your audience a smattering of a feel for these, but they work. And, all the charts so far have been of famous people.
Yeah.
Well, now here's a chart. Here's a chart of a Russian woman. And when I first taught in Russia, in what was that, 2013, she was someone who organized the webinar. It was supposed to be including Kapiel Raaj, who couldn't go at the last minute because of failing health. Deepak Pasari were there, and he and I were the main presenters. But you look at this chart, focus in on Venus.
Yeah, Tapasvi yoga.
Tapasvi yoga, it's with Saturn. It's actually with another natural malefic Mars, but then Ketu from Cancer, because that's a fixed sign to a movable sign, that's a Jaimini Rashi Drishti aspect, right? So, and interestingly enough, just when she moved into Taurus, Charadasha would have started from Cancer and gone backwards.
Yeah.
So she ran Cancer to start with, then followed by Gemini, and came to the 12-year period of Taurus. This coincided exactly with her becoming a Hare Krishna nun, essentially, right? I don't know what they called them. They wouldn't have called them nuns, but it's the same idea, right?
Yeah.
And after 12 years, just after she moved out of that period, she got out of that status.
Okay.
So in other words, this Venus shows Tapasvi yoga. She moves into and so yoga show what? Dasha show when? When is that going to get activated? It's going to get activated when she runs the Taurus period. She moves into this period, she becomes a Tapasvi. She moves out of that period, she stops being a Tapasvi. So this is how karma manifests, and this is how Jyotish and both the Jaimini and Parashara system can show what karma will manifest when in an extraordinary way.
So in John Pope, the Pope you were showing, it lasted throughout life, but for this person only lasted very temporarily.
Right. Well, and I mean, she's still, a spiritual aspirant, but she wasn't living in an ashram, doing spiritual disciplines. It wasn't of the same level of intensity.
I see.
Okay. Yeah. She's still very much into the Vedic spiritual tradition and does practices and all that sort of thing. So I shouldn't have, sort of indicated, I shouldn't have suggested that she got completely out of it. It just wasn't to the degree. And of course, there's many more reasons here in the chart of Pope. So look at his exalted Jupiter disposited by an exalted moon. So there's many more reasons here that he was, became a priest and then was obviously a lifelong spiritual renunciate, living that life, and then obtain the highest ecclesiastical position that you can in the Catholic Church, obviously becoming Pope, religious leader to many millions. So one more set of combinations I want to talk about, and you got exposed to these when you took the class, Kapiel. What really intrigued me is when I came across yogas, sutras in the chapter on the effects of planets from Karakamsha about successful authorship. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Successful authorship. You'll remember these.
Yes.
And basically what it is that you got the three natural benefics, Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter, and then the moon. And the sutra says that if from Karakamsha Lagna, there's the influence of these four grahas predominantly on either the first or the fifth house from Karakamsha Lagna, then the person will be an author. If the moon and Jupiter in particular are involved, they'll be a very successful author. That'll give the most success as an author. So now the planet with the highest degrees here is who? Who's the planet with the highest degrees here?
Oh, it's Mars.
And at 28 degrees of Cancer, it's going to put it in Pisces in Navamsha. So Pisces is going to become his Karkamsha Lagna, right?
Yeah.
Now, let me show you. This is the chart, by the way, of a Swami, very famous Swami, who wrote 95 books.
Wow.
95 books that were very widely read. They were commentaries on things like the Bhagavad Gita and other, spiritual scriptures, right? And so, hugely successful author.
Yeah.
Now, if I show you Karkamsha Lagna, the chart from Karkamsha Lagna, you'll notice that in the Karkamsha Lagna is Jupiter in its own sign, Vargotama.
Yeah.
And then the moon is in its own sign in the 5th house from there.
And it's in its own sign.
And it's in its own sign. And then it's the 5th lord in the 5th house. And then the 5th house also gets the aspect of Mercury.
Yeah.
The only one missing here in the formula is Venus.
Actually, Venus aspects the ascendant.
Thank you. See, I was just testing you.
Yeah, all 4 of them are involved.
You passed the test. Actually, I missed that. Thank you for seeing that. Okay. But so the sutra is totally fulfilled, completely fulfilled. So, all the natural benefics plus the moon all influence either the 1st or the 5th house from Karkamsha, and you have a hugely successful life. Mm-hmm. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here is that when I first studied this chapter on the effects of planets from Karkamsha Lagna, I presumed that these combinations would only apply from that Lagna. What I discovered in working on charts is that they can actually apply from other Lagnas and even dynamically from Dasha Lagna.
Yes, Dasha Lagna, absolutely. Very true.
From Dasha Lagna, and I came across this when, Lord Byron, I was a literature major in college. Lord Byron, his narrative poem, Danson, was a favorite piece of literature of mine. And so, it was very interesting for me to see when in Chara Dasha he first published that work. And I discovered it was in his Capricorn major period, all right? Capricorn major period. So if you use Capricorn as a Lagna, who falls in the 5th house from there?
Jupiter.
And what aspects does Jupiter get?
Moon.
From the moon, a very completely bright, bright full moon. And of course, Jupiter is the AMK in the 5th house of authorship, aspected by the DK. That's a Jaimini Raja Yoga, right? And so I realized, and this wasn't the only thing I saw, I saw it many times. And so I realized that these combinations can be applied dynamically.
And also with the 9th house, if Jupiter was in 9th from the Chara Dasha, would that also involve with publishing? Because 9th house is originally publishing.
That's an interesting question. I'm just really focused on the combinations given in the Jaimini Sutras for successful authorship. Does the 9th house have to do with publishing? It does, right? Okay. It does. But of course, you've got to author something before you can publish it.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the other thing is that, there's this controversy in the world of Jaimini as to where this Lagna of, referred to as Karkamsha in Parashahora, referred to as Swamsha in the Jaimini Sutra itself, where it should be applied. Should it be applied in the Navamsha, or should it be applied in the birth jar, or should it be applied both? Of course, Kapiel Raaj taught, and I completely validate what he taught, could be used in both, though. So when we think about the static potential for becoming a successful author, his Karkamsha Lagna, so Mercury is the AK here, right? It's Vargotama.
Yeah.
Very strong Mercury, one of the planets of authorship, obviously. And it was actually in his Mercury Mahadasha that he became quite a successful author from the Parashari point of view. But it also means that Sagittarius becomes his Karkamsha Lagna. Becomes his Swamsha Lagna. When we're applying this Lagna to Navamsha, we're calling it Swamsha, which is the word used in the Jaimini Sutra. Now, look at what happens. Well, first of all, you got Mercury Vargotama in the Lagna, right? Look at what happens to the 5th house from there.
Oh, Moon, Jupiter, Venus aspect.
And the house itself has the Lord and an exalted sun.
Yeah.
Right? So think about how many grahas influence the fifth house from there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right?
Right.
In every one of the planets that
Doesn't
give
sun
success.
represents Vedantic study or classical older studies from Jaimini perspective, if it's in the fifth
Excuse me?
room?
Excuse me?
It
Oh, yes.
does
So, you know,
sun,
Jupiter,
sun also
Jupiter in
represents
the
like Vedantic studies as well? Or
correct. No, that you remember
what type of
correctly.
a writing did he do, Lord Byron?
Well, he did some major philosophical writing. Some of his poetry was very high philosophical stuff. Now, Don Juan was a satirical poem. But, you know, the point I'm making here is that his static potential for being such a successful author is actually shown more dramatically from this particular lagna in his D9, where it shows up very dramatically. And then, you know, as a part of also in the Jaimini Level 2 class that I'm going to be starting this weekend, you learn this special dasha, Padmanabhamsha dasha.
Oh, that's my favorite, yeah.
That is calculated and utilized strictly based on the Navamsha. And so when you look at when Byron first became hugely famous, he was actually one of the most famous men of his times. It was in his Leo dasha.
Of course.
It was in his Leo, containing the moon Jupiter.
Yeah.
And then see the fifth from there has that
Mercury.
Bhagotama Mercury. You see?
Yeah.
So this is what I mean when I started testing these combinations that are given as the effects of planets from Karkamsha Lagna. First of all, I discovered they really worked. Secondly, I discovered that they didn't just work from Karkamsha Lagna, they could be applied in other Lagnas, and they could work dynamically. So say some people have come to me and said, geez, I'm really thinking of writing a book. Does it look like it should be able to do that, right? So one of the things I'm evaluating is in Chara Dasha, I'm seeing the influences on the current period and the fifth from there. And, or if I'm using Padmanabhamsha Dasha, I'm using that sign Dasha in the Navamsha, D9, and seeing the influences on the first and fifth from there as a way of assessing that potential for successful authorship during that time. Now, I'm looking at different things from the Prashi point of view and trying to see the confluence between the two, right?
Yeah.
So the Jaimini system, I've described it as having a sort of a elegant simplicity, you know,
Yes.
a real intellectual beauty. I love it. It was a speciality of Kapiel Raaj. It's become something of a speciality of mine. And it's worth learning if you're interested in Jyotish.
Have you ever just given a reading just based on Jaimini, no Parashri principle, just Jaimini? Have you ever tried that?
It's interesting you should say that. You know, Kapiel Raaj, you know, I got to spend a lot of time with him individually, which was very privileged on my part. And, you know, we took a trip together and we had a lot of time in the long bus rides and the long roads of India to different locations. And I had a lot of chance to talk to him. And he told me that, you know, when he was first learning the Jaimini system and he really had to figure a lot of it out by himself, he got some clues from some old pundits. He decided that he was just going to start giving his consultations just based on Jaimini, and see if he could predict based on that. And of course, he demonstrated that he could. In fact, when he first came to the U.S., he was astonishing people by his ability to see events in their past life and to predict. And, you know, the only thing that was known here was the Vimshotri Dasha in the Parashri system. So people were wondering how he was getting it, you know, because they couldn't see it in the Parashri system. What little did they know is that he was doing it all on the basis of Jaimini, right? He was doing it all on the basis. Now, you're asking me, when I'm looking for certain events, if I'm being asked about certain events, there are certain events that I will look at in the Jaimini system first before I will look at it in the Parashri system, but I'm always using the two together. I'm never predicting just on the basis of the one, because because it's more powerful. You can feel more certain about your prediction if you see the confluence between a same period showing a certain event in the Jaimini system and then also in the Parashri system. In fact, whenever I go to do this, I think you know this, I'm using two planetary dashas and applying the Parashri system. I'm using at a minimum, two Jaimini sign-based dashas plus transits. right? And this is the methodology that was taught to me by Kapiel Raaj, and this is the methodology I use in the methodology that I teach.
Okay.
And so that is what I had to share with you and your audience today.
Wow. Any plans of Kapiel Raaj coming to US at all?
No, there was some hint that he might do it years ago, but he's just, he's frail now. His health is up and down. He's in his, he might be 87 or something like that. No, I don't think there's any.
Okay.
So the last thing I wanted to mention, if you don't mind, is that, again, I have this course, Jaimini Level 2, starting this Saturday. If people are interested, if you go to my website, which is just www.markboney.com, Mark with a C, you'll see on the front page there's a little box where it says Jaimini. Click into that. You'll see the details of that course.
Okay, perfect.
It's not for everyone. You should have some basics of Jaimini before you take this level of course. All right?
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Take care.
Thank you. Namaste.